Hello. Welcome to episode 113 of the Carrier's Edge podcast. I am Mark Morell, co-founder of Carrier's Edge, and with a special guest today,
Jane Jezraoui, other co-founder of Carrier's Edge, and we are in very busy mode. We've had a very busy new year, and it will finally be over next week when we do our fabulous Best Leads to Drive For Education and Awards Conference.
We are absolutely in grind mode right now.
We are in grind mode. I am working on my keynote, and I found a quote that I investigated, and it's a quote that should I tell you what the quote is?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about using the quote, "May you live in interesting times." And
the old curse.
Well, it has become believed to be incorrectly that it is a Chinese curse.
Oh, okay.
But it is not.
I didn't know it was Chinese. I always thought it was sort of offered as a bit of a double-edged sword. Yes.
I mean, the idea of it, the whole idea of that phrase is we all understand what it means, that it's not good. Interesting times is not a good thing. And it can be very bad, but it was actually said so someone investigated, and there's been a bunch of people research quotes and they try and find the actual origin of who said it. And it was actually said by, I can't remember the guy's name, Robert Chamberlain or Richard Chamberlain. Not Richard, Robert Chamberlain.
Okay.
And he said it around 1898. And it started being repeated in the 1900s, and people just started saying that he was actually he was British, and he was a British parliamentarian.
So this is not Chamberlain that was the prime minister?
No.
Okay.
No. He was a liberal. He was a liberal, and it's hard to say whether he was a representative, like he was a member of parliament, or if he was just somebody who is close to the government. Winston Churchill said that he was kind of, one of the most influential and powerful people who wasn't part of the government, but he was like around types forever, and he was a liberal, and it kind of went, really interesting guy. And he ended up he had some kind of title of sort of minister of the colonies. So that's what his title was, because he wasn't, when he had this title, apparently he had some titles that he could have whatever title he want in an agreement where all of the different parties in Britain, I guess there was a bunch of parties, and they were all kind of saying, okay, well, who gets what? And they were debating about who was going to control the government. Because in a non-two-party system, this is the kind of thing that happens, is there's all this negotiation. And he was not allowed to have Secretary of State. Like, there was a bunch of them he was not allowed to have, but he was allowed to be in charge of the colonies. And you may not know this if you're an American, but the colonies means Canada.
Well, Canada, India, Australia. Yeah, all of the Caribbean and African countries that the Brits would have had. So
he would have absolutely been in charge of us. Now, I can't remember if his name is actually Robert Chamberlain, but it's something like that.
He's some kind of Chamberlain.
Yeah, well, he's a British guy. So this British guy, at the turn of the 19th century, 19 to 20, because the turn of the century, there's been a couple.
So at the beginning of the 20th century then?
It was coming into the 1900s. So it was 1898 that he said this. And he said something about, we are living in interesting times and how it's a source of anxiety.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he says about 3 lines, and it's actually more interesting than just the "May you live in interesting times," because the really interesting thing is what was happening around 1898.
Okay.
A bunch of stuff happened.
Tell us, history professor, what was happening?
Well, what was
happening in England in 1898?
No, it wasn't just England. There was about 4 different wars that were happening. Cuba got its independence. The Spanish-American War just ended.
Right.
There were 2 other ones that there was a German, no, is it Germany and Turkey? There was a couple of European wars, Spanish-American War. The states had just Hawaii wasn't the state, but they just kind of got it. I can't remember how but they basically took over Hawaii. So they did that. They had just ended a really bad economic period. It was the worst economic period until the Great Depression.
Wow.
So this was just second to the Great Depression. So there was like a lot of stuff going on, but also the things that were happening. Marie Curie discovered radiation with her partner. I can't remember his name. I just remember hers. Someone else discovered X-rays. War of the Worlds got written. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula.
Wow.
Like, so think about all of those things that were happening at the same time. And there was many, many fewer people in the world. Can you imagine the chaos that must have been happening at the time? Because all of these countries are at war. Things are getting switched around. Apparently, Panama was when Panama became independent. So that was happening. Like, things don't happen like this. Like, wars are kind of chaotic. Independence fights are kind of chaos. So Cuba and Panama, people are writing bizarre stories.
Yeah. Now, at the time, people probably didn't realize that those were going to be such enduring classics, but still, there's a lot happening at that time, and these are probably kind of an outcome of all of that craziness that was going on.
War of the Worlds, yeah. There's a lot of war going on, and someone wants to write some science fiction about it. Then I think if you look at there's so much being written all the time now. It's really hard to tell, but there's a lot of interest in science fiction.
Yeah,
there's a lot of interest in fantasy. That is probably not one of the hugest franchises now is, comic book franchises.
It's not a coincidence, really.
Yeah, because, what is happening around you, that's what artists and writers and they are reflecting those times.
So is all of this working its way into your opening speech?
Well, I'm going to be mentioning that and sort of mentioning, when does this thing goes out afterwards, but
no, this is out on Wednesday.
So this Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you get a sneak peek if you're
a diligent podcast listener, you'll have a sneak peek, an advance sense of what's going to be included.
And you also get a sense of the rabbit holes that I will go into when I'm sort of thinking, oh yeah, I like this quote, may you live in interesting times. It's not a stretch of the imagination right now, right? No. We are living in interesting times.
Yes.
What I always do is I don't just kind of go, oh, I like this quote and slap a quote on there, or whenever I do a presentation that uses a quote, find the source.
Well, you have to now, because you use the quote and then somebody comes and complains about it, or opens up a tweet storm about how you misused it, or didn't actually mean that, or you attributed it to the wrong person and it was really said by this other person 200 years earlier, or it's now a problematic quote, or it's a great quote, but that person is now awful. You can't just use a quote. You have to go and research it now.
But at the same time, I think that's kind of good, because you shouldn't just, grab a quote that you don't know where it originated.
Or the full context.
Yeah. You need context. And I think that kind of goes into what we're trying to do with the Best Fleets conference, is provide context. I think that's our main goal, is to say these companies have won this award. Why?
Yeah.
Why are they better than others? And, provide some context around that. Even, basically starting with, they try.
Yes. Yeah.
They beat you. If you're in the Best Fleets to Drive For program and you didn't get on the top 20, it basically means that somebody scored better than you. It doesn't mean that you're not a good company. It just means that somebody else is working on it, and specifically for this award. And I can't really stop people from working on this award particularly.
Well, the one thing that I always say about that, and I'm sure I've mentioned it here over the years, is that becoming a Best Fleet is partly about doing things. And certainly you have to be doing a fair number of things to keep up with and surpass the other fleets on that list. But just as important is your ability to tell the story of what you're doing and why. And that's what I find most interesting as I watch companies come into the program, go through this process of going through it once and then getting their results and reviewing them, come back again, and okay, maybe they make it as a fleet to watch, and then they get their results and they review it and they change some things and they come back again, and eventually they make it onto the top 20. It is really interesting to see the evolution of how they tell the story of what their company is all about. And that, I think, is just as important as all of the things that people are doing, because building a good company, you have to have a vision for what you're trying to accomplish in the world. And it can't just be, we deliver freight on time and safely. Well, so do 10,000 other companies. So what makes you different? And it can't be, well, we deliver freight using Freightliner trucks. Okay, so does everybody else. Like, what are you doing that's actually different? And that's where it's important to be able to say, this is the vision of who we are, what we are creating, the kind of workplace that we are building, how we want to deliver that service. And the better you can articulate that, the better you're going to be able to attract the kind of people that are a match and that are a fit for that and want to do the same thing the same way, and then have more success as a business. And it becomes sort of a flywheel that allows you to build the business more effectively. So I think there's a lot of value in fleets taking the time to learn how to tell that story, because it will come through in their marketing. It will come through in how they attract drivers. It will come through in all of the communications that happen within the organization. They will be much more of a cohesive team and much more effective at building the business. I
absolutely agree. Telling your story is not just a marketing and sales tool.
Yeah.
It's kind of encompasses, everybody has to be able to tell the same story.
Well, and one of the things that is different about the Best Fleets program is that we need to hear that consistent, cohesive story from everybody. So it isn't just one marketing person who writes an essay about how great the company is, submits that, and then gets a prize. You need to have a bunch of people that are part of the interview that are also on the same page with that. Then the driver surveys need to reflect that as well. And you put all of those things together, that's when you start to get a sense of, does this company actually have a story? Do they know what that story is? And how well are they able to communicate that to other people? And if it's just a marketing person doing it, you're lost, because they're just going to use all kinds of words that nobody else ever uses. And it's going to be generic as anything.
Well, there's also, the thing is with marketing is, and sales kind of take whatever they can get and pare it down into sort of bite-sized bits that they can use for marketing and sales. You don't get a lot of time, so you have to do a very, what do you call it when things are compressed? Like you have to do a very, like a compressed version of your entire company's value proposition. So you have to, like, it has to be bite-sized and easily remembered and all of that stuff. If you only know those words and you don't know the history and the belief system behind it, then you are going to come across as very two-dimensional.
Yeah. Well, when you try to fill in other stuff beyond those basic compressed descriptions, when we say, okay, tell us more, and maybe there isn't more, right? Because marketing is about having a concise message. Okay, well, now we're going to ask you for 100 variations of that message through the questionnaire, and we're going to follow up with those in the interviews, and we're going to get your drivers to tell us their version of it.
And I think this is why we really emphasize having some executive presence in the best fleets, because the executive or, you know, someone in senior leadership is going to know the entire scape of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone who is in a junior marketing position is not going to know. Someone who's only been there for a year and a half is not going to know unless they go and get that information from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've seen definitely doesn't happen as much anymore where it's just the recruiting.
Yeah.
People who are trying to get this going. That doesn't seem to happen that much anymore, especially when people are serious about trying to get onto the top 20. They're not, you know, they're actually doing some work. And I think that's the message that we've been trying to send for the last 15 or 16 years is like, this is a serious one.
Yeah.
You can't just,
You can't phone this one in.
You can't fill in some nice words because we're going to ask you what those words mean.
Yes. And now is the point where we're getting to share with everybody all the things that we found. And so we've got of the million things that have to be done before the conference, we've got 750,000 finished. Yeah.
Maybe 89 million.
Yeah, so we've got the books, the results books that went off to the printer, and I got told today that the books are finished and they're ready to ship, so those will be shipped out today, which is good. And we've got all of the other tons of things that we have to do, pens and lanyards and portfolios, and I don't even know what all the other things are. Oh, the badges going to the printer today, and the what else? The printed agenda, like everything under the sun. There's so much minutia that has to be dealt with. Like today we were looking at the final details for how many bottles of water do we want out at each break, and do we want juice and soda or just soda, or what kind of coffee, and how long can the coffee stay out for?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like, and this is before we even
it's
get
just
there.
minutia.
How many vegetarian lunches and pescatarian and all of these things that you have to deal with, and which things are gluten-free and garlic-free and soy-free and everything else free. And
I know this is your absolute favorite thing to do.
I am terrified of doing this stuff because I'm sure I'm going to miss something. And I'm sure there's something that I'm going to overlook, but I am very thankful, I have to say publicly, probably not for the first time, I'm very thankful for Lindsay, who is very into the details and will pour over all of those things and check, and found all kinds of things in the catering order that I hadn't even noticed that are worth exploring. And they all probably are good ideas, but we want to confirm that they're all intentional. So she's gone through all of those and asked a bunch of questions about it. So that part of it is...
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes,
oh,
thank
my
you,
goodness.
Lindsay. And we've done the same kind of thing with all of the graphic deliverables, because we got signs and all over the hall. We've got a giant movie that plays in the main hall, plus all of the signs at different places. So all of that is sent off, and like the list of things that you have to do before you even think about what am I going to talk about for my hour on stage.
Well, we have to not forget social media, and Martha, who has been slaving over 3 different social media feeds with different size everything and different character limits, and, trying to figure out the exact wording that we like to use. And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So the attention to detail is great. And we're hopefully not going to have to do as much next year.
Well, we are fortunate that we have a pretty thorough task list for all of these things that we went through last year. And then we did a post-mortem of all the things that we'd missed or we wanted to change. And we put that together with the task list, and we've got a pretty good sense of it. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape. There's a lot of little loose ends, like I've got to send a message to all of the media and make sure that they know where to go and what to do. Send a message to the sponsors, make sure they have everything, and remind them to bring collateral. So when we can do the final stuffing of the portfolios with all of their flyers and things, like get all of that kind of stuff coordinated. I do have the guest speakers mostly coordinated. I've got a few things that I have to do on that, but they are shaping up to be really good. So there's a lot of stuff to do. And I'm sure there's something that I'm forgetting right now that needs to be done today, but it will hit me at 4:00 tomorrow morning.
Oh, great. This is not great for my sleep, but
sleep.
Hey, I need sleep. If I'm going to stand up in front of people and be coherent, I need sleep. That is, yes. I am, it's unfortunate, but it is true. I am not one of these people who are like, oh, I only need 4 hours and I'm fine. No. I think that is, maybe 1% of the population, and I don't know how non-psychotic they are.
Yeah, I resent those people.
Well, I don't know if maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not, but I don't think there's any shame in saying, yeah, you know what? 9 hours. 9 hours is good for me.
Yep.
I am happy with 9 hours.
Yeah. Well, what happens to me when I get into one of these kind of zones like we're in now, where we've got a lot of things and it's hard to really turn it all off, is I have like all of these songs that jump into my head about not sleeping, like that Bon Jovi song about I'll sleep when I'm dead, till I'm 6 feet under, I don't need a bed. Live while I'm alive and sleep while I'm dead, or sleep when I'm dead. And Bare Naked Ladies had a song.
I'm alive.
Bare Naked Ladies had a song about who needs sleep. You're never going to get it.
One.
Yeah. And so there's things that come up that you just sort of have to kind of power through. And the worst thing is when you think you're in good shape and you're like, okay, I can relax, I can go chill out and actually get some sleep. And then at 4 a.m, oh crap, this thing. Like a couple of days ago, I woke up and remembered, we actually have to go and pick up the backdrop from our storage unit on the way down there. That would be very bad if we were at the airport and we're looking around like, okay, so who's got the backdrop? Oh, nobody.
So this is the thing to have photos in front of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have.
So does that have the backing as well? Like, do we have to cart that entire thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just asking.
Yeah, it's in the storage unit now. It's got a hard shell case. We brought it back from Charlotte last year. Now we have to take it down there and set it up.
Okay.
Yeah, things like that you kind of remember. We need to get that, the table cover, the steamer, so that we're not taking pictures in front of all wrinkled things. All the things we've learned the hard way over the years. From when you go and look back 10 years ago at an event, or 5 or 6 years ago from an event, and you're cringing at something. Well, now we have those things on the checklist to make sure we deal with, but we have to remember them as well.
So what else about the conference do you want to talk about besides all the minutia?
Can you tell what I was working on before this?
Yeah. Well, I am telling you about what I was just working on. So
I'm looking forward to the guest speakers. I think they're going to be excellent. Well, I look forward to the things that we get to share, because I think we've both got some really interesting things to go through. And I'm really looking forward to the the panel people. You've got 2 panelists that you're going to be working with. I've got a guest speaker on one of my sessions that's going to be excellent. But then we also have 2 outside speakers that are, I think, going to provide some really nice content. So one of them is Kevin Mulvaney from Wilson Elser, who is a transportation lawyer. We'll talk about the litigator's perspective on workplace culture and why it is better to have a good workplace culture, and how that actually helps in court, which people often don't think about. People have a ton of safety policies to try and cover their butts if they ever end up in court, but actually the good workplace culture helps too. It doesn't just help in that it prevents crashes, but it helps when you actually get to court, which is kind of a different angle. So I think that's going to be really cool. And the second one is Stephen Bojan from Sentry Insurance, one of our insurance partners, and one of the larger insurers in the transportation industry. And he's going to talk about the insurance perspective and the things that they notice when they go in to do an assessment of the risk, because it isn't just about loss ratios. They certainly look at those things. They will look at the loss run of a fleet to see where the crashes are, but they're going to look at all of the policies, and not just pieces of paper stuffed in a drawer, but all of the processes, how the company operates and how the company finds its drivers, manages them, builds them into safe professionals, and really all of the same things that we evaluate come back into insurance risk assessment. So he's going to talk about that, and he's got a slide that I'm really interested in, that is how to spot a problematic fleet in 1 year, in 1 month, in 1 day, and I think in 1 hour or something like that. There's things that you can assess really quickly to determine whether or not it's going to be a good fleet or a problem fleet. So,
well, we have that too. I mean, we have started to notice that there are things that fleets do when they're going to do well and when they're going to not do great.
Yes.
There's a difference. And it's like first impressions. Like sometimes fleets will give us a terrible first impression and then kind of overcome that. Mm-hmm. And then it's fine and they're on the top. Like we've had fleets who are on the top 20 and in the Hall of Fame now who gave us a terrible first impression. Mm-hmm. So things like not being able to get an interview date, or not having their, not doing their surveys properly, or just giving us a lot of back and forth on something,
mm-hmm.
not answering a question in time.
Or waiting till the last minute to book an interview and then trying to beg for an extension or claim that they're so busy or their dog ate their homework and they need to be able to do the interview at some other time. Yeah.
That's the one. And during COVID, that was that was really problematic.
Yeah. Waited till the last minute and then, our whole office got COVID and we're out. So, why didn't you plan for that?
Well, COVID is a kind of an outlier.
But it was also 5 years ago.
And so you tend to see patterns. You start to see patterns. Like something will happen and you'll be like, oh, that was weird and I didn't like that. But, we don't judge people because we don't judge the top 20. It's scores. No. But what we find is that our impressions are reflected in the scores because the driver surveys have the same kind of thing. If you can't get a hold of someone, it's likely the drivers can't get a hold of them either. It's not like that's just how some people operate. So you start to see these patterns, and it's interesting that, I think even when someone goes in legally or for risk assessment and things like that, I think there's other things that pop out at you in terms of how you are treating drivers, how you refer to them, just the feeling of the place. Does it feel like, do you have a whole bunch of people who are not speaking and get talked over or that kind of thing? And you can start to kind of get a sense and you often see it reflected. I'm not saying that it makes that much of a difference to our scoring because you may do the interview and somebody else may do the scoring and it won't make any difference.
Well, I think what stands out for us is we see that and it kind of, like you say, first impressions matter. It gives us a sense of the company. So then, yes, you go through the interview and it might be like there's a couple of parts of it. One is scheduling the interview. Another one is looking at the questionnaire. And then the third part of it is actually conducting the interview. And by the time those three things have happened, you've got a picture of that fleet. And then when you get into the scoring where it's a completely different thing, you might look at, you might find that the company did really well or did really poorly on the few questions that you scored, but you don't have a sense of the overall picture of how well they're doing. You have in the back of your head your experiences with them. And then when you look at the final results, when it all comes together, all the scores are put in and it's all weighted and all that other stuff, then what sticks out for us is we go through it and we're like, okay, yeah, that doesn't surprise me how well that fleet did based on my experience with them. What does stick out for us is, okay, I didn't expect them to do the place there where they did. Based on my experience, I thought they were going to do really well because it was a great interview. Or I thought, I didn't think they had that much going on, but they ended up having great scores. So it's when it doesn't line up that it really sticks out for us.
Yeah.
And we tend to notice it. And the ones that are kind of like that, sometimes you get these dark horses that come along and you're not really expecting it. And all of a sudden, there they are, very close to the top 20. And that's often how they get to be fleets to watch.
Well, it's kind of changed as well because people are getting better at filling out those questions.
Yes.
And so you don't have to follow up with so much. It used to be that I had to follow up with everybody on the, how do you prevent harassment and violence and blah, blah, blah. I almost don't have to. You go through it and you go, yep, there's an answer there. I don't have any questions about it. Mm-hmm. But before, like 5 years ago, we were still like trying to get people to like, come on, do something. And now people are doing something. So it's kind of a non-starter now. Yeah. Or the question about how to get feedback. I mean, there's a lot of information that you may not do it. You may not cover it in an interview because we only really, I don't want to say only, but we tend to try and make sure that we have all the information and to score, not go and talk about anything particular. Mm-hmm. And the interview is important, but it's not as important as making sure that you are filling out that questionnaire really well. Because the interview, there's 100 questions and the interviewer can only ask so many things in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And, you may have a great conversation, but it may not actually fill in the blanks for every single question that there's a blank.
Mm-hmm.
We try, but, you know, every so often, like, and we have to be really vigilant about numbers. So we have to get the numbers.
Yep.
And so if there's a fleet where that hasn't answered any of the number questions properly, then we have to go through those before we can have a conversation about what the fleet wants to talk about. I think that's why we can get surprises now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in terms of surprises, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the driver surveys, because you've been digging through those for the last week or two, getting your content for your general session, and you found some very interesting things. And I think it would be good to give this audience a bit of a sneak peek at what you're finding, what you're going to talk about on the driver side.
They're not happy.
All right. Thank you for that.
Well,
we're done now.
Everything is down. And in some cases, it was down last year and now it's down more.
Really?
And what I would say is that with the economy, the way that it has been, with inflation, with all of the things that are continuing to go on, I think some fleets are not paying attention to the effect it's having on their drivers. And so things like trust is going down. The number of positive responses to the so we have a question is I want to recommend my carrier to other people.
Yeah.
The negative responses are definitely going up.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was very interesting because most of the time people are saying, yes, I'm going to recommend, like if they're going to do this survey, they're probably going to recommend their company. And so the top line, the strongly agree is going down. So I'm starting to see, like, and this is out of 5,200 surveys, I'm starting to see the top line the strongly agree go from 70% to 59.
Wow.
Not from this year and last year, but like from a few years ago, it would be like 70-75%. Everybody was really happy. And now it's basically just going down, 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 down. And there's a really interesting one where the question is about, have you been given enough opportunity for input into technology?
Ooh, good one. Yeah.
That is a surpass. That is by far, and contractors hate it even more. Like it's like way down for contractors, where the negative response is much higher. I think it is it might be the most negative responses is up like around 5% or 5 to 6%. And you have to understand that when you look at negative responses for these surveys, I am looking at generally 1 to 2% is the strongly disagree,
right.
The negative stuff.
They're really unhappy. Yeah, it's never very high.
No.
So it doesn't take a lot for that needle to move a fair bit. So if you're seeing it's at 5%, that's like double what it typically is.
Well, it used to be that every single time, every year, it would be routing. It would be about, not happy about routing.
Yeah.
And routing is still down. It's like 3% strongly disagree, but no. Tech input into tech is by far the lowest.
Interesting.
Which is interesting because they're generally okay with the tech that they have.
So it's not that they're against technology.
Yeah.
They just don't feel that they were consulted. They feel that they're being
being thrown at them.
Yeah, they're being given it whether they want it or not.
Yeah. And routing continues to be a problem. The relationship with the dispatcher, I think, is becoming more and more of an issue. People are saying that, there's two dispatcher questions. One is your dispatcher cares about you or listens to you. And the other one is your dispatcher does something about your problems when you report them. And the first one, your dispatcher cares or listens to you, is not bad. I think it's like 3%, which is on the low side, but it's not. It might be in the 2s, which is not bad.
This is the people that are unhappy, that really disagree
the strongly
with that
disagree.
thing.
Yeah, I'm only talking about strongly disagree right now. But when you ask them if, how does it go when your dispatcher does, can the dispatcher fix a problem? No. No, that's in the 3.5, 4. Like that's,
really?
Yeah. So they're really, they are.
And again, this is over more than 5,000 surveys, so it isn't just 2 or 3 unhappy people.
No.
This is hundreds.
Yes. And the top line, what I find the strongly agrees are really going down. Like just kind of in general, think people are moving to somewhat agree and neutral. Like I see a lot of movement towards neutral, where the drivers are like, yeah, okay, I guess they do it. I haven't put this in a presentation, but I think this is an interesting thing where we asked about the lease purchase program thing is like, and we said not applicable as an option. 7.5% said not applicable.
Okay.
And it's like, it's a chaotic response. It doesn't show really anything. And so I read the comments, and the comments are like, I didn't know there was one. Would it? Oh, does a lot of it was, is there one? I didn't know. And then you have the odd, yes, it's great, and the odd, no, it's terrible. But it's impossible to tell from that, like whether it's valuable or not. It just tells you that it's all over the place. People are doing it or not doing it. Some are doing success. Like it's kind of like how you would envision the answer to how is your lease purchase. It's kind of negative, kind of positive, a lot of chaos in the middle.
And all over the place.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had a slide where you referred to this as the great disconnection.
Yes.
Which I thought was an interesting concept. Is that the drivers are not feeling connected to their companies anymore?
Yes.
So it's not just that they don't trust the companies or they're not happy about the tech. They're losing that sense of personal connection that they had.
Yes, I would say, because I got that from the Great Resignation, and that was, everybody quit their jobs. I don't know how many people actually quit their jobs in trucking, but in other industries after like sort of in 2021, 22, everybody was, running around trying to get a job.
Yeah, everybody was quitting their jobs when they didn't want to go back to the office.
Yeah.
They had better options.
A lot of chaos around that. This one is just, I really get a sense of just, I don't care anymore. I'm almost a give up.
Wow.
The pay, the comments about pay are not improving. They don't think they're fairly paid. Drivers don't think they're fairly paid. Some do. There are people who are happy about it. But
have drivers ever thought they were fairly paid? That
question, the routing question, was always the lowest scoring one.
Right.
I'm not getting good routes.
Yeah, fairness of the routing is always an issue.
Fairness of pay was, it was okay. Yeah. It was like not, there were people who didn't agree, but it was in the 1 to 1.5%
What you would
strongly
see
disagree.
is drivers always want more, but they typically would understand that the company is doing what it can.
Yeah.
Right. So you would see comments that, well, it would be nice, but I know they're doing what they can.
And I think you still see those comments. And if that's what your driver survey tells you, then you're fine. But there are people who are unhappy or who are very unhappy. Or the other thing about dispatchers that I thought was very interesting was it depends. That was the overwhelming answer that I got from reading through the comments was, mine is fine. I don't know about anybody else's. It depends. I had this person before and they were terrible. This person is better. So I think the consistency of quality in dispatch is a real issue in the industry. That there isn't a standard of how to build your skill set in your dispatch or operations, like whoever is dealing with the drivers. And what I noticed this year is that there's more companies who are saying, well, there are now two different entities looking after drivers. One is the driver services part, which does not deal with dispatch. Fleet manager, like if you were a driver manager, you're dealing with the well-being of the driver, not where they're going. And then there's another part where they have planning and dispatch are together and they do the routing. But driver services has input into that in terms of quality, like in terms of home time. So driver services worries about home time and getting the hours, but the planning and dispatch is that part of operations is worried about the business side of it. So those two parts of the organization are talking to each other, which I think is a much better plan than having the person who dispatches be responsible for making sure the driver's okay and making sure the freight is okay.
Yeah.
That's a tall order.
Well, and what's always been an issue is that those people generally aren't trained to be sympathetic counselors or overseers or supportive managers. They are generally tasked with getting freight delivered. And we've started to look at that, where we ask how these people are evaluated and what are the incentives, what are they being measured on. And a lot of times in the past, it was purely about revenue production. It was mile production, profitability, revenue production, some different set of metrics that are really all about generating revenue for the business and not really about the driver. And it is starting to shift. I did notice when I was looking at the scores in that area this year, much more commonly we see fleets saying that they measure productivity, but they also measure safety and retention, driver satisfaction, and a broader range of metrics that give you a better picture of how well that person is doing, not just at getting the freight delivered, but also keeping drivers happy and safe doing it. But it's an area where there's really very little training. Like, drivers get a ton of training on the safety side of it, and they will get best practices and things like that. But we don't see a lot of training for fleet management on leadership skills, interpersonal skills, any of those kind of things, like how to effectively manage a team of drivers. We don't see very much of that.
No. The other thing that I was just thinking of when you were talking about that is, I think the shift, and I don't know why I didn't think of this before, and maybe other people have, but I think the shift in, dispatchers and drivers might be, being at odds, or this whole, like, there's a general level of frustration at dispatch, just as a general, like, that's what the surveys, basically, that's the tone of the surveys, is that they're not that happy with, like, that sort of management of how that's done. But I think it probably shifted when just-in-time deliveries started becoming really common. I think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you didn't expect to have freight there when you wanted it. You couldn't go and buy whatever you wanted whenever you wanted. It was, things would be there or not be there. And sometimes you had to wait, or sometimes you had to order it. There's Sears catalogs where, you had a lot of catalogs and people would order from them, and you didn't expect it the next day.
There's a bit more flexibility in delivery. Yeah.
So you had the times that drivers were required to be at a certain place, or the way that you organize freight. And I think brokers were probably not as common as they are now. They were probably much, much less required, because now you need freight brokers to manage some of that load, to manage that, all of the, who goes where and which and how fast and all of that stuff. When we first started Best Fleets, I didn't really hear about them, but now I hear about them a lot.
Yeah.
And it might be because I just read a lot of freight waves, but I think that just in time, that, we need everything now, has really transformed the trucking industry, and we never really focused on it.
Interesting.
When Amazon started getting big, that was around the time, like 2005, 2006. That was kind of when we were...
Not too long before we launched the Best Fleets program.
Yeah.
That was when we launched Carrier's Edge.
And Amazon didn't become...
They didn't start with this 2-day shipping thing for a while.
No. Yeah. Or even overnight or same day and all that stuff. That was not on the table. But I never really heard very much about it, like through conferences and stuff like that. Nobody really talked about just-in-time deliveries and how that affects.
Or how pervasive it was. Like, that's been a part of manufacturing for a couple decades, but it's now in everything.
Yeah. So how, what kind of feat are you accomplishing just to get things from A to B? I mean, that's pretty impressive. And that's why I think AI is becoming so necessary in transportation, is because it's just getting so complicated. Because we only have this much here and we have this much here, and you have to put together all of these puzzle pieces. Yep. So I think that might wind its way into something I talk about at some point.
Okay. Well, putting together the puzzle pieces is what we are doing this week. finalizing all of the bits for the conference and getting our content ready. And we've just scratched the surface of the content that we're going to be going through.
Well, if we did all the content, then...
Oh, we haven't even, we barely talked about one session. I've got a session, I've got 2 sessions, you've got another session in addition to the one that we just talked about. So there's lots more. And if anybody's interested, go to bf2df.com, bestfleetstodrivefor.com, and you can get information on the conference and register. There's still registration available, and it's $300 to go to this thing. So it's a great deal. And we will be seeing people there. I think this is a good place for us to wrap up and get back to it, because now you've given me some ideas to go and add into my own content. So let's wrap it up there.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.